The world has gone nuts this last year. Anytime that happens, we start getting stories about how society is going to collapse. That is a scary thought. Chances of it happening are slim. But in case that happens, where are the best places to be if it does? To answer that question, I went down the survivalist and prepper rabbit hole, including reading about how you can make pee safe drinking water. Yes, I read that for about 30 minutes. I may never look at my own urine again without gagging. So I reached out to a local expert, Daryl.
Hi, my name is Daryl. I live in a cave in Eastern Oregon. It's nice.
So let's see what I learned and where you should move if you think the shit is about to hit the fan. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 5, the Ozarks, America's underground refuge. If you've ever dreamed of disappearing into the wilderness and living like a cross between frontier explorer and paranoid doomsday prepper, the Ozarks should be on your radar. Tucked away in the heart of the Midwest, sort of, primarily in Missouri and Arkansas, this rugged paradise offers everything an off-grid enthusiast could ask for. It's got natural resources, underground hideouts, and enough isolation to ensure you won't be bothered by nosy neighbors or, the apocalypse. So the perks of living in the Ozarks: it's got a massive cave system that's ready for your bunker to be built in. You know what's better than spending thousands on a state-of-the-art underground bunker? Moving into a place that already comes with one. The Ozarks are teeming with natural caves. These geological wonders provide an instant shelter, natural insulation, and protection from whatever post-apocalyptic horrors you're trying to avoid. Zombies? Unlikely. Roving bands of desperate survivors? Definitely possible. Either way, the caves offer more security than a flimsy wooden cabin. Bonus, caves tend to be naturally cool, so goodbye sweltering summers during your apocalypse. What else the Ozarks got? Fresh water galore. Nothing says long-term survival like reliable water sources, and the Ozarks have it covered. Between its rivers, springs, and underground aquifers, you'll never have to worry about dying of dehydration. Just imagine waking up, stepping outside your cave home, and filling up your canteen with fresh spring water, all without having to pay a water bill. Now that's like a dream come true for me. My water bill's always really high. The Ozarks are also an all-you-can-eat buffet of wild game. If you have even the slightest survival skills or a good hunting guidebook, you'll never go hungry in the Ozarks. The forest is crawling with deer, small game, and more fish than you could shake a spear at. Fishing, hunting, trapping, you name it, the Ozarks provide it. And if you're not into the whole chasing your dinner thing, the soil is fertile enough for you to grow crops and channel your inner homesteader. Corn, beans, and squash will be your new best friends. Fewer people, fewer problems. One of the biggest concerns in any survival situation is other people. The more folks around, the higher the chances of someone will want to have what you have. Luckily, the Ozarks are sparsely populated. That means you won't have to worry about fending off hordes of desperate scavengers. Sure, you might have a hermit neighbor a few miles down the road, but odds are they're just as happy to keep to themselves. The downside? Tornadoes. Nature's wrecking ball. Let's get one thing straight. The Ozarks are in Tornado Alley. So while your underground cave fortress is a great defense against looters and elements, there's still the small matter of wind funnels of destruction ripping through your region. If you think you're safe from Mother Nature's mood swing, think again. Final verdict? If you like your survival plans with a side of scenic views, abundant resources, and just a touch of rugged isolation, the Ozarks might just be your dream destination. It's got the essentials: food, water, and ready-made bunkers, sure, the occasional tornado, and the reality of being miles away from civilization are trade-offs, but what's survival without a little adventure? If you're up for the challenge, the Ozarks are waiting. Just don't forget your hiking boots and a solid tornado plan. Number 4, New Zealand, the apocalypse prepper's paradise. If you've ever thought about where you'd like to be when the world inevitably crumbles into chaos, zombies, nuclear fallout, robot uprising, you pick your poison, look no further than New Zealand. The island nation is basically a 5-star bunker of doomsday prepping, a cozy little sanctuary at the bottom of the world where you could sip your tea while the rest of civilization turns into a dystopian wasteland. So let's break down why New Zealand is the VIP lounge of survival spots. The first thing is geological isolation, because distance equals safety. When society collapses, everything turns into a free-for-all Hunger Games scenario. The last place you want to be is somewhere accessible. New Zealand isn't terribly accessible to the rest of the world. Situated in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, far from major conflict zones, this country is like that one friend who conveniently didn't see your text when you needed help moving. While the rest of the world is busy fighting over the last baked beans, New Zealand will be sitting pretty with its oceanic buffet. Sure, you might have to deal with the occasional yacht full of desperate billionaires, but that's a small price to pay for a front row seat to the apocalypse, minus the carnage. So why is it so great? It's got a diverse ecosystem. New Zealand isn't just pretty, it's practically designed for survival. Need to go off the grid? No problem. The country boasts lush forests, towering mountains, fertile farmland, and a coastline so long that you'd swear it was trying to avoid commitment. Whether you want to build a self-sufficient farm, fish for your dinner, or live out your dreams of becoming a rugged mountain hermit, this land is on your side. Another bonus, New Zealand has a climate that won't kill you like, the outback of Australia, where it's just temperatures 120 degrees. And they don't get a terrible amount of snow like, let's say, the Swiss Alps. What else they got? Well, they got sheep, the unsung heroes of survival. With roughly 5 sheep for every 1 human, the odds of you starving are pretty low. Wool for warmth? Check. Meat for protein? Check. A potential companion when human interaction becomes a distant memory? No judgment, but also a check. Imagine the world where your survival depends on a fluffy army of livestock. Now, if governments survive some form of apocalypse, New Zealand might be the one. A well-functioning government is a rarity in a crisis. While most governments tend to resemble a circus on fire even before a disaster strikes, New Zealand's is refreshingly competent. It's small, relatively well-organized, and has a track record of handling crises without immediately descending into anarchy. Even in an apocalyptic scenario, chances are New Zealand's government would hold out longer than most. They've already mastered the art of keeping things together in an island in the middle of nowhere. Final thoughts on this one? If you're serious about surviving an apocalypse with a touch of comfort, New Zealand is the obvious choice. It's got the isolation, the resources, the sheep, and the government that might actually keep the lights on longer than most countries. So when the world starts to fall apart, book your one-way ticket to Christchurch and head out from there. Now, one other note to this, everything I said about New Zealand also could work in Tasmania, which is an island between Australia and New Zealand, closer to Australia. Number 3, the Pacific Northwest. If you like your apocalypse with a side of craft beer and flannel, the Pacific Northwest is the promised land. Picture this, towering evergreens, crisp mountain air, and a whole bunch of people who have been preparing for doomsday since before it was cool. The region has long been a haven for off-the-grid enthusiasts, conspiracy theorists, and eco-conscious dreamers alike, making it a strong contender for your end-of-the-world escape plan. So why is it great? The first thing is abundant fresh water. Rainfall and a robust river system ensures that dehydration will not be the thing that takes you out. Unlike the poor souls scavenging through the desert wastelands, you'll have your choice of rivers, lakes, and rain barrels, assuming you don't mind the occasional gulp of pine needle flavored water. Bonus points, if you can rig up a gravity-fed filtration system, that'll make you feel like an off-the-grid MacGyver. Second thing, the forest cover. Ultimate hide-and-seek arena. Thick tree canopies provide excellent natural camouflage, making it much harder for raiders, bandits, and the latest bunch of social media survivalists to track you down. What else they got? Hunting, fishing, and doomsday hipster foraging. Forget rationing out that last can of beans. The Pacific Northwest is teeming with fish, deer, and enough wild edibles to make even the pickiest survivalists swoon. Whether you fancy yourself an amateur hunter or just want to forage for mushrooms, like hippies up here in the Pacific Northwest already do, your food options are significantly better than whatever is left in a looted supermarket. What else they got? Well, they got ready-made, like-minded communities. The Pacific Northwest already has an impressive number of self-sufficient communities. Homesteaders, preppers, and various communes have been thriving here for decades, meaning you won't have to start your own from scratch, unless you're already into that kind of thing. Now, one thing about Pacific Northwest and the preppers up here, they got guns. They got a lot of guns. People always seem to think that, if you live in Oregon, you don't have guns. Yes, people in Oregon have a bunch of guns. And there's a strange number of veteran preppers here. Like, they came out of the Army or the Marines and they're preppers in the Pacific Northwest. Now, the downsides of surviving in the Pacific Northwest, the relentless rain. Hope you like being damp, because the Pacific Northwest will keep you perpetually soaked. Your new best friend is a waterproof everything and a very patient attitude towards mildew. That cozy flannel shirt, yeah, it's going to smell like a wet dog and regret in no time. Another downside, overpopulation risk. You're not the only one who thought of this genius survival plan in the Pacific Northwest. If too many people flood in, the Pacific Northwest could turn into the world's most scenic refugee camp. Imagine a Mad Max scenario, but with more kombucha stands and aggressively friendly street musicians. The other thing? Bigfoot, the wild card. I'm not saying he's real, but I'm also not saying he isn't. The Pacific Northwest is his domain. And honestly, if you're planning to hunker down in your backyard, you might need to start thinking about Bigfoot diplomacy strategies. Maybe he'll be a good trading partner. You know, if Bigfoot exists, he knows where the best mushrooms are. Final verdict: if you're looking for a place to ride out the apocalypse of civilization while maintaining a steady supply of coffee and free-range elk meat, the Pacific Northwest is calling your name. But be ready to embrace the rain, dodge the TikTok survivalists, and just maybe come to terms with the possibility that Sasquatch has been planning his own survival strategy all along. Number 2, the Great Basin. Not to be confused with the Great Plains. Yeah, that's a thing. People always seem to think the Great Basin and the Great Plains are the same thing. They are not. The Great Basin takes up a touch of California, most of Nevada, some of Oregon, a touch of Idaho, a touch of Wyoming, half of Utah, and a sliver of Baja California. Yeah, it's big. So the world's ending. Bummer, right? But don't worry, you're ahead of the game because you're already thinking about where to ride out the apocalypse, like a true survivalist. You could fight your way through the cities and do all that stuff, or just start heading to the Great Basin. So why would you move to the Great Basin? Well, first thing is, remote and undisturbed. You know, where the zombies and people aren't. When the world goes full Mad Max, the last thing you want to do is be stuck in traffic with the rest of humanity, all of whom are suddenly very interested in your stash of canned chili. Cities, absolutely no-go. Too many people, too much chaos, and way too much competition for dwindling resources. Small towns, better, but still populated, and people have a funny way of getting desperate when grocery store shelves are empty. The Great Basin, however, is a massive expanse of desert and mountains where your closest neighbors might just be a grumpy badger. There are fewer people, which means fewer raiders, looters, and awkward social interactions. If you want a place where you can quietly build your empire of off-grid survival, this is it. First thing you want to do is get solar power. Electricity might be a thing of the past, but that doesn't mean you have to live like a caveman. The Great Basin gets a ridiculous amount of sunlight, making it a perfect place for people to harness solar power. If you set up some panels, you might have enough juice to keep your lights on, run your radio, and maybe even keep your fridge humming. Because nothing says winning the apocalypse like a cold drink in the middle of a wasteland. Why else is this a great place? The locals. People have been prepping and living off the grid here for decades and decades. They might just become your survivalist mentors. But yeah, believe it or not, people already live off the grid in the Great Basin. These folks know how to grow food in the desert soil, find water in places you'd never expected, and perhaps most importantly, how to avoid getting eaten by the wildlife. If you roll in expecting a warm welcome and free survival lessons, think again. But if you approach them right, you might gain some valuable allies. Trade, learn, and respect their space, and you'll be far better off the grid than going solo. So the downside of the Great Basin. Of course, the Great Basin isn't magical and a problem-free utopia. Here are a few challenges you'll need to overcome if you don't want to be a cautionary tale. Water. You need it. The Great Basin doesn't have a bunch of it like the Pacific Northwest and the Ozarks. Rainwater collection can help, but don't expect to fill up a bathtub on the regular. Every drop counts, and water management will be key if you live in the Great Basin. Another problem? The weather. Nature's way of testing your commitment. The Great Basin doesn't do comfortable. Summers will roast you like a roastier chicken, and winters will freeze you solid. Spring and fall, mere blips on the calendar before Mother Nature resumes her relentless attacks on your well-being. The trick? Layers, lots of them. You'll need gear and equipment that can handle drastic temperature shifts, because one day you'll be sweating through your shirt at noon, and by nightfall, you'll be shivering like an extra in a winter survival documentary. Now, I read of people that like this idea because they think aliens will be coming down when we have this grand apocalypse thing and collapse of society, and they believe this is where the aliens will land, somewhere in the Great Basin. Final verdict? If you can handle extreme weather, secure a reliable water source, and embrace solitude, and potentially UFO sightings, the Great Basin isn't just a survival option, it might be one of the best. All right, before we get to number 1, if you have not subscribed to this channel, we would appreciate it if you did, and don't forget to hit that bell notification so you know when we upload again. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, the Canadian Rockies, nature's fortress of solitude. If your idea of a good time involves total isolation, breathtaking scenery, and the ever-present risk of being eaten by wildlife, then boy, do I have the place for you. Welcome to the Canadian Rockies, a rugged expanse of mountains stretching across British Columbia and Alberta. This is where civilization politely bows out, leaving you alone with nature, your survival skills, and the occasional bear who didn't get the memo that you're not on the menu. So why is this a great option? Low population density. The Canadian Rockies are delightfully devoid of large human settlements, making them excellent choices for anyone looking to escape the hustle and bustle of, well, everyone. No traffic jams, no noisy neighbors, and best of all, no one stealing your canned beans in a post-apocalyptic scenario. Just you, the mountains, and the sound of the wind whistling through the pines like nature's own ASMR video. Another great thing about living here, the all-you-can-drink fresh water supply. One of the biggest survival must-haves is clean water, like we talked about earlier, and the Canadian Rockies delivers that in spades. Glacial rivers, pristine mountain lakes provide some of the freshest H2O available, assuming you don't mind it being slightly below freezing and requires a bit of purification. Because let's be honest, even paradise isn't free from the occasional bacteria party. Meat. Fresh meat is the other thing they're known for. If you can hunt fish, or at least convincingly barter with a local wildlife, you'll never go hungry. Moose, elk, deer, and an impressive array of fish and birds in the region, giving you plenty of protein options. The challenge, of course, is these creatures tend to have a keen survival instinct of their own, so good luck convincing them to be your dinner. It also has built-in security. Mountains are basically nature's version of a fortress wall. Not only do they provide stunning backdrops for hermit lifestyles, but they also make it ridiculously hard for outsiders to find or reach you. And that is definitely a good thing. Now, the downsides of living in the Canadian Rockies? Winters. Yes, they make you question your life choices. If you think your flimsy urban parka is going to cut it, I have some bad news for you. Winters in the Rockies are not just cold, they are, why is my breath crystallizing inside my lungs cold? Without proper shelter installation and a good fire, you won't last long enough to even worry about your next meal. Other thing, the local wildlife, yes, it's not as friendly as you might think. They got bears, wolves, and just about anything else that will eat you up there. And don't get run over by an elk. They are surprisingly larger than most people think if they've never seen one. Most people think they're the size of a deer. No. Imagine a muscular, sleeker moose with pointy horns instead of those big platform antlers of a moose. The other downside is isolation means no one's coming to help. The further you go into the wilderness, the more you realize that hospitals, grocery stores, and Wi-Fi are a thing of the past. Break a leg? Hope you're good at DIY splints. Need antibiotics? You better start foraging. While solitude has its perks, being completely cut off from modern conveniences can quickly turn into a peaceful uh-oh in record time. Now, if societies collapse, those things are probably gone anyway. Final thoughts. The Canadian Rockies are a dream for the self-sufficient, the adventurous, and the possibly unhinged. If you have the skills, the patience, and a deep love for unfiltered nature, this might be the ultimate escape for you. However, if your idea of roughing it involves weak cell signals and slow Amazon delivery times, perhaps reconsider your wilderness survival fantasies. Alright, that's today's video. A little bit different, a little bit fun. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.